his back on us till the day that we die. Feeling life is a lie, cause it gets worse. And each day it burns till the day that we die. Feeling life is a lie. Oh, tainted mind, need a break so time, stigmatized for life. Been labeled a sin, never been accepted, feel ashamed so they hide. Can you tell me how could you let me down? Where's the hero now? Can you hear me loud if you're there in the clouds? Where's the hero now? Cause we feel Earth turn its back on us till the day that we die. Feeling life is a lie, cause it gets worse.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our online forum. So, thank you for joining our second online forum for the Students Show the World series. We are overly excited to have you here. Before we begin, let me introduce myself. My name is Mashita Muhammad Yusuf. I'm one of the curators of the Students Show the World series. A little bit of background about Students Show the World series. It is a monthly online session that aims to share, inspire, motivate, and educate the students on diverse topics and by invited speakers from fields inside and outside of University of Nottingham, Malaysia campus. For our second session, we have invited three speakers to join us for a forum on our universities preparing students to be ready for the workforce. The session will be recorded and posted on UNMFB Facebook page later. For Q&A session, you can ask in the Slido link in the chat box. You can also unmute yourself during the Q&A session and ask directly. Without any further ado, I would like to pass the session to my friend Sabrina, who will be moderating the session. Sabrina?
Thank you for the introduction, Mashita. So welcome everyone. My name is Sabrina and I'll be the moderator for today's session. So before we begin, please let me elaborate on today's forum topic. So our session for April is on our universities preparing students to be ready for the workforce. This forum focuses on career readiness of university students and even recent graduates based on the preparation done by the university. Let's take a look at the forum overview. Okay, so now we'll be having a brief introduction for all of our esteemed speakers before our forum officially commences. Then, after the speakers, we will have an interactive Q&A before we wrap up the session. So let's take a look at who we have today. So Dr. Michael, could you please introduce yourselves and probably share what you do?
Certainly. Thank you, Sabrina, and as for the lovely introduction there as well. My name is Michael Hall, and I'm the Director of Teaching and Learning for the School of Education here at the University of Nottingham in Malaysia. And I've had quite a lot of experience over the years in dealing with work-based learning and preparing undergraduate and postgraduate students for the workplace. So I'm originally from the United Kingdom, but I lived in the island of Seychelles for many years as well. So sort of got dual nationality at this moment in time. I'm very pleased to be here, and thank you ever so much for the warm welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. It's an honor to have you with us today. So next, we have Fatima. Fatima, could you share a bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Sabrina. So I'm Fatima Taeb. I'm a recent graduate from Nottingham. I did my bachelor's in computer science. And throughout my time at Nottingham, it was one of the amazing 4 years I had in my life. I was involved in the education network. I was a school of computer science representative. So if there are any computer science students here, wave at me. And I was also involved in University Blue Sky, which is an initiative to tutor refugee kids in English and math on the weekends. And right now I'm back in Qatar with my family, and I'm working as an artificial intelligence developer at Qatar Mobility Innovation Center. So we do a lot of interesting stuff with AI, machine learning to improve traffic management, smart cities, 5G, and all those interesting stuff. So it's great to be invited back to UNM and share my experiences of how it's like to be a fresh grad during these times.
Thank you so much, Fatima. We're glad to have you back and really looking forward to see what you have to share. So last but not least, Mr. Brian, could you share a bit more about yourself to the audience?
Hi guys, good afternoon. My name is Brian Larish and I am the CEO of the Make It Right movement. Now, the Make It Right movement is a rather unique organization. It's the only one of its sort where we are the corporate social responsibility arm of the Brickfields Asia Education Group. And our sole purpose is to serve the students, to in many ways, very well connected to this topic, the highlight to develop the student population to be a more holistic student. So I have a long history working with Nottingham, and I appreciate the invite. I very much enjoy being here today and look forward to the dialogue that we're going to have coming up.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Brian. It's our pleasure to have you here. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So most of us will know Industry 4.0 is on the rise, but are universities preparing students to be ready for this? So according to a survey conducted by Talent Bank in 2020, over 70% of employers would hire fresh graduates, though most of them only rated 5 to 10, 7 points out of 10 for graduates' career readiness. And if you can see on the table, in the pie chart right now, 22% of them are unable to find jobs, whereas 70 are able to. Okay, next. Yeah, so as mentioned previously, most students were rated 5 to 7 in terms of career readiness after completing their university studies. All right, so what exactly are employers looking for in fresh graduates? From the same survey, more than 90% of graduates would choose a good attitude over grades. Meanwhile, if we take a look at 21st century skills, according to the World Economic Forum, what students need to learn or acquire to be ready for what's to come actually comprises of complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, people management, coordinating with others, emotional intelligence, judgment and decision making, service orientation, negotiation, and cognitive flexibility. So for those of you who are joining us today, you can also reflect back. Do you believe you have these skills? Are you acquiring them through your university journey? So how can we interpret this data? Let's hear from our speakers themselves. So firstly, I would like to call on Dr. Michael to share. So as a lecturer yourself, I'm sure you're more than aware of 21st century skills, and you also understand what students may need to be ready for the workforce. What are your thoughts on the career readiness of your current students and recent graduates you've worked with?
Well, thank you again for the opportunity to talk about this. And it is a very complex situation we're facing with things like Education 4.0 and the current Malaysian education blueprint, which is having an impact on all of us who are in education as well. When I've looked at those terms, there is not the skills which employers are looking for. There are no surprises in terms of creativity, innovation, and the attitude of what Sabrina had mentioned there as well. I've worked with a lot of employers over a few years, and in a recent survey I did, not here in Malaysia, but back in my home country, where we conducted a survey with a group of employers and said, look, what is it you're looking for in graduates? What do you want them to be able to do? And these were general business management students or business studies students. And I sat down and I'm thinking, okay, well, they'll probably want to know, they'll want them to know how to do complex accounting procedures and know that fairly quickly. And that wasn't the case. The first thing they said, we'd really like them to turn up to work. So, and that was a bit of a shock, really, of that their experience of some, and again, your statistics, which you've shown in the, excuse me, in the previous slides there, again, isn't a great shock. And to see that quantified is reinforcing what I've always thought as well. we're missing it, I think, in universities throughout the world, not just here in Malaysia, missed many opportunities to develop the employability skills of undergraduates and graduate students. So we are very much, universities are very much about focusing on the content of that. Students must know, and students must be able to recite a lot of this theoretical concepts in order to show they can study at degree level. And that's, whilst there is a place for that, there's nothing like good theory for good practice. We really need to think about what we're doing in lecture theatres and in classrooms as well. And the way we deliver and we develop these skills. Each one of those skills is highly working with people, highly recommended and highly valued by employers. And we need to think about what we're doing in classrooms, about in developing those skills as a naturally occurring phenomenon of falling out of the content knowledge. Yes, the content is very important, but also we need to develop those skills and students' confidence and students' ability to be able to communicate with different levels of people across the organization. It's really important. And a lot of the time, the concept of employability, particularly in the United Kingdom, was pushed on to career advisors or administrative assistants who will say, oh yes, we might sit down with you and show you how to do, here's an example of a curriculum vitae, a CV or resume, whichever we want to call it. And okay, they're already overstretched with what they have to do. But again, we miss the opportunities to do things in tutorials, into classrooms, where we can develop these skills in a safe environment. Because it really doesn't matter if it goes particularly wrong in university or in class, is when they get into the workplace as well. And shockingly enough, where employers are rating graduates on a scale, in a scale of 1 to 10, between 5 and 7, should be a bit of a concern for us to think about as well. So as a lecturer, as a teacher, whatever I class myself as, but as a teacher, essentially, what's important for me is really is supporting those students, all of the students, to be able to do things like presentations in the group. And you can see some of the students in not this year, they're great this year, but in previous years, they've sort of, oh no, what are you doing this for? So I don't like speaking in front of people and I don't want to do it. Well, do it here, get used to it now in this environment where it really doesn't matter. And then when you go into the workplace, you're going to be well equipped to be able to meet those challenges as well. And things like report writing or those IT skills, which are again reflected in the blueprint, Education 4.0 or the Fourth Industrial Revolution, whichever we want to call it, is really critical. But there are many missed opportunities to develop those skills as well. And we rely on students to develop those information technology skills as a naturally occurring phenomenon. So we've got to think about the curriculum. And from my own experience about the curriculum, we invite employers to come along to, I think they're called sort of partnership committee meetings. And most universities have these program committee meetings. Employers come along and we sit down and usually on a Thursday evening, and we talk about the degree. Employers come up with good ideas or suggestions of what they need, but they're often disregarded by universities because of the constraints, because of the desire to go through the curriculum and make sure students know those learning outcomes as well. And we're not, and in some ways, many universities are missing those opportunities to develop the softer skills. I don't mean soft as not important, but the discrete skills such as communication, the ability to work with others, to deal with conflict, and to improve their overall levels of emotional intelligence. And we have really got to seriously think about this as well. I talked to many of my previous students, and some are ministers of ministerial departments back in Seychelles, or chief executive officers, and they said, thank you for what you did for us. You made us believe in ourselves, and look where we've aspired to now. Others may not have got there, and didn't have a particularly good start of when they went into the employment field, because we didn't prepare them. Mm-hmm. And then employers were complaining that graduates weren't able to sort of think independently or take the initiative, or to think problem solve as well. And they were constantly looking for levels of support from other workers, and because the universities and colleges, schools are very good at giving support, student support, there was an expectation that that sort of support would continue in the workplace. Mm-hmm. And notwithstanding that, but the workplaces do provide things like mentorship for new employees and new graduates, and that is proven to be very good. But there's that missing link between university, college, and the schools, and the workplaces as well.
Yeah, thank you for the insightful sharing, Dr. Michael, and definitely it's our blessing to have you as one of our lecturers, and definitely to have more lecturers like you. But I think you've brought up a very good point that would lead well to our next speaker, Fatima. So with what Dr. Michael has mentioned and the earlier statistics shown, as a recent graduate yourself, I'm sure you're more, what was it like entering the workforce? And did you feel university prepared you for what was to come?
All right, so I think like there's a lot of things that university did prepare me for, and some things that it didn't. So first of all, let me talk about like how is it like entering work as a fresh grad, especially during these unprecedented times. So let me talk about the good things first. Like entering the workplace, one good thing about it is that I believe, this is my point on it, but I believe work is easier than university, because at work, you don't have to worry about exams and constantly maintaining your GPA and your grades. I think one thing I dislike about university is that I feel sometimes it suffocates curiosity, because your main goal sometimes is just to get that first class, and in the process you forget to enjoy learning and explore different ideas. So at workplace, you don't really have to worry about grades or anything. Maybe your biggest worry would be to present your findings and so on. So that's one thing I like about work. It's less stressful in that manner. Of course, it has different stresses that we can talk about. And also at work, you're not confined by the curriculum. Like you have like wealth of areas to explore, and you get to work on real things. Sometimes at university, I think one thing that universities need to work on is some students don't see how the stuff they're learning ties into what they'll be doing later on in life. So some lecturers are good at like tying everything that they're learning and like how, for example, learning the Pythagoras theorem will help you do this. I'm coming from a tech background, so I'll probably use examples that are more technical. Like knowing, for example, in business, sort of solving real life business challenges, because, at university, things are more like structured and organized, like, you need to do this in order to get that result. But at work, there's some uncertainty, you need to discover things on your own, and there's not like clear guidance on how to get things done. So yeah, moving on to the challenges, I think one challenge, especially as a fresh grad entering the workplace, is that your peers or your boss might not trust you that much at the beginning, especially the first few months with work, because obviously you're someone that's new, fresh in the field. You might not know everything. So those first few months will be basically working on gaining the trust of your team, showing that you are worthy of the task and your ideas and your thoughts are valid. So one way I would recommend students to help gain that trust is to have work experience during your college time, during university. So like internships, being involved in hackathons or real life competitions shows that you do possess some of those skills and you can contribute to the team. And another thing, a challenge at workplace would be something that I touched on before, is like lack of guidance or feedback as well. So in university, after you submit your assignment, or you usually get feedback from the teacher, know what you did wrong, and it's usually constant. And you would, in the workplace, sometimes you would get like negative feedback and positive feedback, and knowing how to deal with that in a professional manner is an important skill. And also, a good thing about school is that you have teachers, you have lecturers, and you can always, you're a student, so you're expected to not know some things, and you can go to them and understand it. But in the workplace, sometimes you're left on your own. Some companies are great at providing mentorship programs, like Mr. Michael mentioned. So one thing that you might be wanting to look at when you're applying at companies is to see like what sort of mentorship programs they have offering, and like the team, do they value someone to like constantly learn, and so on. And also one challenge at the workplace is that mistakes are usually like higher at stake. So in uni, if you get a bad grade, or if you fail a subject, or if you miss a class, it's not it's not the end of the world. Like, you can still get by, you can make up for it with extra credit, you can talk to your professor about it. So you have a bit of more, there's less responsibility. But at work, if you do a mistake, it's not only like something personal. You would affect the company. Sometimes it might, cost the company money. So like you need to be more. The responsibility is higher. So one way to tackle that is working closely to your team members. Talking, making sure that you communicate your ideas clearly, and understanding what you have to do and how to approach it. So, and another challenge, I believe, at the workplace is managing relationships, especially professional relationships. So at uni, you're usually surrounded by people from your age group. So everyone is like 18 up to like 25 years old. So, you have the same interests. There's clubs and societies, you can make friends. And if you're on bad terms with someone, you can just avoid them. You don't have to deal with them all the time, because it's just union and that's it. But at a workplace, you're dealing with people from all sort of backgrounds, people from different age groups, people with different beliefs and ideas, and you need to maintain a good relationship with them. You can't be on bad terms with people, or else it's going to make your job really hard. So you need to learn to be nice to everyone. That's sometimes at uni, we're more like, out there with our ideas. We just say what's on our mind, because there's not much to lose. You can be more opinionated. At work, you can't just like talk about your opinions that openly and get into like deep discussions with everyone. You have to, learn the art of small talk and maintain a level of professionalism, and don't gossip and be egotistical. So a company would rather hire someone that's average at what they do, but nice, than someone that is like, a genius, but has horrible personality and has a they're very egotistical. So you need to know how to like manage relationships and so on. So in terms of did university prepare me for that? So I'm working in the tech field, and the tech field it changes very rapidly. There's new technologies coming every day, if not every like few hours. There's new tools coming out. So did university prepare me for that? I would say yes and no. No, in a sense that a lot of the tools that we learned at uni, they're outdated. Like I don't really use them at my workplace. Not a lot of companies use them anymore. So like the technical know-how is not really that relevant. But what it did prepare me for is a very important skill that we all should aspire to have, is learning how to learn. I think this is a very crucial skill to have, especially during these rapidly changing times. University taught me like how to, gain knowledge, how to structure my thoughts, formulate my answers, knowing like where to find knowledge, like, how to use the library, how to use like a database research system to read a paper. So and like knowing how to when when I face a new idea or new tool, knowing where to start. These things, I think university taught me to do that. So it didn't really teach me, like, for example, like that specific programming language, I would say, or like how to do the task I'm assigned to by my boss. But it did teach me how to approach it, how to communicate, knowing how to solve it and so on. So I think in terms of like, does university prepare you for the workforce or not? It depends on like, what did you do during your university time? I think a lot of people have this idea that university is your golden ticket to the workplace, and like, that's it. You pay for education and then you graduate and then that's you guarantee to work. That's not necessarily true. It depends also on like what you did during your time at university, what experiences you had, what did you make out of it. Grades is not like the biggest indicator of whether you'll be employable or not. Like one thing I would like to mention is that even the internship offers I got and even this work offer that I got, none of them asked me for my grades during the interview process. Like, which is something that made me sad because I stressed so much over my grades, and in the end, like, they didn't even care to ask me about my grades. All they asked about is, what did you do? The way I present, the way I talk, the knowledge that I have. That's more important. And later on, grades just like reaffirm that. So I think it depends a lot on like the students themselves to also push themselves in gaining those skills, and universities should also work harder in providing real life skills to students.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing both the benefits and challenges. I think it was very insightful for everyone, and definitely grades aren't everything. I think it's more affirming to hear from the graduates themselves because they really experience what it's like, especially when you've entered it at such a challenging time. So it's really good to hear from you. So now we'll move on. And for Mr. Brian, as someone who's in the industry while also having very close touch points with educational institutions and NGOs, what are your thoughts on these statistics? Do you think students are being equipped with the skills that are demanded by employers?
The simple answer is I'll echo what both Michael and Fatima said. I don't think so. It's quite sad actually that to see that after 3 years or 4 years, in some cases 5 years, if you're doing a double degree, you come out and then you basically are at the same level with somebody who didn't go to university at all. So I think it is a major issue for me, and that's why the whole point of the Make It Right movement was created to try and temper that, give an opportunity to the students to advance, to go out of their comfort zone, to make the mistakes, as Fatima correctly said, make the mistakes, and Michael too, do the things that put fear in you while you're in university. Get over yourself, go beyond yourself while you're in uni. That's the whole point of uni. I think the paper chase has become too much, especially here in Asia. And I also work in Holland and the US, and we have the same problem. We find it very difficult to hire. 20, 30, 40 people submit their CVs, and of the 30 or 40 people that submit their CVs, we bring it down to 5. We don't even interview 10 people because the quality is so unacceptable. And what's even more ironic now is that companies like PricewaterhouseCoopers, Ernst & Young, globally have already started hiring people that don't even have degrees anymore. Now, definitely, don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating that you don't go to university. I mean, as a person working in a higher education institution, and universities like Nottingham, which have a very high standard, I mean, we believe, I'm sure you all believe too, that the studies is valid. But to what extent do you develop this validity is entirely up to the student. And the point that Fatima made about internships, I'm a big believer in that. Now, a little bit about my background. I studied law, but never went beyond going to the bar, taking my bar, and so on. So I was never a lawyer. Yet I managed to work for the United Nations. Why? Because number one, I created a network. Number two, I volunteered for a lot of things. That's why immersion in a nonprofit is one of the areas I think experiential life learning skills are extremely important. And it's something that we push our students to take part in. I'm really impressed with the way you guys have organized this. It's very well laid out. It's very well thought of. And this is the kind of experience you're going to have when you work in real life. And these are things you need to know of. And when you work in an office, I think you need to be clear why internships are so important. You need to understand the hierarchy in an office. You need to be exposed to an office, right? In school here, one of the areas that I worked with in Nottingham is the idea of providing education for refugees, tertiary education for refugees. And one of the things that we are pushing our refugee students is to challenge. If you're not happy with what's going on with school, challenge. It doesn't matter whether you're in Nottingham or you're in Brickfield Asia College or you're in Monash or any university, to just because you are not in that power base to be up there with a higher income doesn't mean your right is any less than anyone else. And if you have that sort of thinking already from the time you leave university, then you believe you have a place in society. The moment you think less of yourself, and this is not being arrogant, the moment you feel less of yourself, you're going to lose in the whole scheme of things. You're not going to move anywhere forward. And that is why internships are so important. We need to look at internships as a learning curve, understanding, and again, with internships, understand what is the purpose of the internship. Understand how does your boss work like, right? What he or she does should be your number one priority. When we go and do assignments, your job is to finish the assignment regardless of all other issues, because your number one purpose as a company is to service your client. Personal issues should be kept aside. Of course, there are limits to when personal issues come into play, but that seems to be the issue. And sometimes it's quite interesting to see this younger generation. They're very kind and very concerned and compassionate, but at the end of the day, a company is a company. You need to service your client. If you don't service your client, you lose that client. It's as simple as that. So where do we find the balance is where I believe experiential learning via internships, via volunteerism, via immersing yourself in the community. At the end of the day, the community is your market. If you understand your community well, you have one leg up already. And make your mistakes now. Make your mistakes now. No one's going to hold you to it. And as correctly pointed out by Fatima, I interview on average about 10 to 15 people a year, and not too many because and ironically, my company, the Make It Right movement, focuses on hiring people with disabilities anyway. So that's a different kettle of fish. But most of the time, even with the PWD community, the issue we have is the attitude they come with. There is a certain sense of entitlement. And it varies from person to person. So it's a pleasure when we meet someone that is already halfway there and have the soft skills to manage. And in fact, some of the interns that have come to work for me, I've actually offered them full-time jobs even before they graduate. That the moment you graduate, if you ever want to come back and work for me, the door is wide open. I want you, right? And that's the way it should be, I think. So don't underestimate the power of your experience, because only then, when you join it together with your diploma, that piece of paper that you're having in university, you're going to be that employee that everybody wants to rush to hire. That's my opinion.
All right. Thank you so much for all that sharing, Mr. Brian. And I think it's very valuable to see someone from the industry who hires personally. And that I think is very valuable advice to let students know, start early, take up more experiences, because experiences itself is a way of learning. So thank you so much. So now I actually want to, go back to Dr. Michael. For me personally, I do believe that it's important that an individual has drive and ambition in addition to the knowledge and the skills. But do you think universities play a role in developing that in students?
They should, and they can. I don't think it's always very successful. I think because we judge the value of a university and a college on its academic performance and on student results as well. And how do you teach somebody to be driven? Are we looking at, is it individual characteristics of a person, or is it something we can develop as a naturally occurring phenomenon? I think it's the latter. I think we can develop people to become driven, to hold those high ethical values and that really solid work ethic. I mean, we're lucky at Nottingham. We've got fantastic students, and particularly, I'm not singing your praises at this moment in time, but saying across the board in Nottingham, we have some very good students who are very driven and get involved. And you can tell the ones who are going to do particularly well earlier on in their academic careers, because they get involved in the societies, in the clubs, and they do that little bit extra of where they're organising events or working with us and helping the lecturing staff to develop the programs. They get involved in student feedback sessions as well and lead those as well. So already we're developing those leadership skills, but that in some respects it may not be enough of what we're doing at this moment in time. And to hear Fatima say that, okay, yeah, did university provide me with the necessary skills and knowledge and attributes? And the answer was yes and no. It did in some ways, but not in another. It didn't really prepare those ones as well. The other thing, just like I'm sure Mr. Bryan will agree with me on this, the concept of meeting deadlines, and not just sort of dismissing those of, well, okay, I'll get an extension. That won't work in the working environment. The employers won't tolerate missed deadlines and missed opportunities, because like Brian was saying, that you have to look after clients, which means meeting deadlines. You have to be enthusiastic about the work you're doing, and that can be reflected in university work as well. But it does need a slight shift away, not a shift away, but more of a focus on those softer skills of developing the whole person and preparing them for society and for the world of work later beyond university. And again, to reinforce what we've all said, the three speakers have said today, it's okay to make mistakes here in a institution, in a university, make the mistakes, but learn from them. And then that will develop those people to be able to become much more driven, and the career aspirations as well. Employers will recognize, and I'm sure Brian will back me up on this, that employers will recognize talent very earlier on. And forgive me for this, Sabrina, but we had the same conversation this morning about being offered jobs before people have graduated. So I'm so glad you've heard it, and you've heard it from an employer, as well as from me as your lecturer as well. So it does happen, and I think what we have to do as lecturers, we have to be. And the one thing we've not talked about is actually sending lecturers back into industry to understand what it's really like. Because us in education from time to time have been criticised that we don't really know what's going on in industry. We may have been in there 10, 15 years ago, but industry has moved on and requires a different set of skills. We have an obligation not just to develop our teaching and academic skills, but also our industry awareness as well. So going back into schools, going back into colleges, teaching and learning and doing things at the forefront is really important for me. And I do that. I do go back into a school. I do go back into a college and teach 14 to 19-year-old students as well. So that is one thing we ought to do. So to answer your question, can we develop drive, enthusiasm and creativity? But yes, we can, but it also has to be championed by lecturers as well. Our enthusiasm for the subjects and for the vocational areas will be infectious. It will be infectious. If we are not excited about the subjects we're teaching, we can't really expect our students to be so as well. Teachers and lecturers are very powerful, and they don't know it half the time. We touch many people vicariously in a ways of that. But what we have to do, teachers have to think about their own level of commitment, their own drive, and pass that on through good practice as well. Imitation is the ultimate compliment. So if somebody imitates you, then you know you've been complimented, and everybody will remember a good teacher. So what we've got to do, we've got to move away from these hard, fast curriculums and you must get over 70% to get a distinction or a first. Or I used to hear in Norwich back in England that they'd come and my students would knock on the door and say, Mike, I really need a 2-1. And almost pushing me into sort of negotiating the grade for work, and that doesn't work. If students want that, they will work towards it. But you cannot, us as educators, and not just in university but in schools, we have to be really good role models, not just in teaching but in the professions as well, and to work much more closely with employers. And to really find out what they need, what is it they really need, what are they looking for, and that can be reflected in the classrooms to be able to generate that enthusiasm and meet the requirements of employers. So that scale from 1 to 10 on the level of satisfaction of graduates will increase if we work together. Sorry, it's a bit of a preaching session that as well, but it is, you have to be passionate about this sort of thing as well. We're dealing with people's lives and futures, and we're lucky we've got Fatima here, who's doing great. Her experience at university was wonderful, but I think a lot of your learning, Fatima, probably started when you left and started work. And that you sort of trying to relearn about what it is, and what we have to do is to close that gap between university and work, and model and be good practitioners in what we do.
Yeah, definitely. I think what you shared, Dr. Michael, was the two things that I really picked out from was making mistakes but learning from them, because we always encourage people to make mistakes and like saying it's a safe space, but if you never learn from it, then that's where a lot of students go wrong. And yeah, I think one of the very interesting thing you shared is for lecturers to go back into the industry and to at least observe to see what the changes are, because when we take the academia path, oftentimes we forget what it's like out in the world. So we may be preparing students knowledge-wise because yes, we've had many years of experience, but what's lacking is now, as Fatima mentioned, everything is changing so quickly. And so, yeah, I think what you shared was very interesting and something that we should all learn from. So I actually want to shift it over to Fatima now. What did you wish was done differently by the university, which would have helped you even further in where you are today?
I would say one thing that I wish the university did more is teaching us the importance of networking. This is one advice I would give to all students here, is to network. It's so important. Network with the students, your classmates, your professors, and even outside. There's so many communities, virtual communities, or even real communities of people with that are in your field. So in the tech field, we have tech meetups every month where people talk about present findings from the work they're doing and all that. So being in one thing that I appreciate that I did while I was in uni is I actually went to those events that were being held at companies, and a lot of the time I was one of the few university students there, which is something I wish, I told my friends at college, is I wish our professors motivated us to do that, because it really helps when you talk to people from the field earlier on when you're in university, so you know what to expect when you graduate. And also it opens so many opportunities for you. The work that I'm doing right now, the role that I got right now, the way I got it wasn't through the normal application process where you just send in an application and wait for a reply. It was actually reaching out, researching a company, reaching out to the hiring manager, knowing what are their problems and how you can solve them. Because at the end of the day, why is someone hiring you, or why is a company hiring you? They're hiring you because they have a problem in their work. They're trying to solve something, and they want you to solve it. So you need to sell that for them, that you are able to solve it, and you have the skill set for that. So networking, I think one thing that is very not talked about, especially in the tech field, I guess it's in engineering, knowing how to talk to people, even like like I mentioned in your like your classmates, having good relationships with them even after you graduate, and your professors. Like a lot of the time you just graduate and you're like, oh, that's it, I'm done with my lecturers and my classmates. I don't want to have to deal with them, which is it's a missed opportunity, because you never know what having a good relationship with them, if an opportunity rises up, they might have you in mind, and then it'll open new doors for you. So networking, that's one thing that I wish university taught me more of. Yeah, that would be mainly it. Focusing on how to deal with people, and because at the end of the day, we're all going to deal with human beings. When you work, you're not going to deal with robots. Maybe it's different in my line of work, but yeah, it's all people that you're dealing with. So knowing how to deal with people, how to network with them, how to sell yourself, that's something important.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you, Fatima. And definitely, I can see the rising importance of networking, how a lot of the events these days are centered on that. So even though, like forums like these, the main topic is on the discussion, who are the panelists, but what really is important for students that they miss the opportunities out on is reaching out to the speakers, or, just getting to know them and making an impression, because that could actually lead them to so many more opportunities. So I definitely agree with what you shared. So for Mr. Brian, you shared earlier, actually, a lot of the applications you get, you don't think they're ready, or they're not up to what you're looking for. So what are employers really looking for when it comes to, especially in this scenario, fresh graduates? What are they lacking, or what would make them the ideal person that you would, upon seeing them, you would immediately hire them?
I think the number one for me is personality. Yeah? I don't want to hire a piece of cardboard. I want someone who resonates with me. I want someone who responds to me. I want someone who has a mind, right? So again, coming back to what both Michael and Fatima said, I think the point of networking cannot be underrated at all. One of my strengths working at the Make It Right movement, it takes me 2 phone calls to solve a problem in another country because of my network in 91 countries. This takes years to develop. People used to tell me, why are you wasting your time with so-and-so? But that so-and-so today, is a director of government for the government of Mauritius. So yeah, it's worth putting in the time. It's worth putting in the effort to know people. And that's basically what it's about. That sense of confidence, because I want somebody that I cannot micromanage. I don't want to micromanage. I want a staff that eventually, after 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, will start picking up responsibility, that me as the CEO can step back and look at them run the company, right? And I give direction and not manage the company myself. That's what every head of any company wants. Because if we were sitting around and micromanaging, where's the time for anything else? We've already paid our dues already. We are at an age now that we want people to take over. And if you want to be the one that takes over, right, look for companies like that. Bosses who want to develop you, bosses, and there will be bosses who are not nice, as there will be teachers who are not nice. So, you need to identify who are your champions within school now, and work with that, right? How do you deal with a difficult lecturer? How do you deal with a lecturer who is more inviting and more forgiving? These are all life skills that you need to have, because that's the reality of life. You're going to be dealing with such people in life. So understand how to label, not label, I guess label is not the right word, because labeling is also not very good. How to read people a little bit better. And from that, you work out much better how to be a good team player, how to be a good supporter to your what do you call it, to your company. So that's very important. So I echo very strongly the idea of networking, and the idea of also discussing. I give webinars every month, and it's like pulling teeth getting any of you guys to ask a question. It's like a gift of God when I get a question. So and it's ironic, when it's finished, suddenly I get 61 inquiries out of 80 students. Why not during the webinar when there's an opportunity? Why do you wait for after the opportunity is lost? It's the same when you go for networking events. Don't ask a question if you're not ready for it. But if you are, you think you have something intelligent and you want to share or ask, Ask. Let people know who you are, that you're not afraid. People spot you during times like this, and people will remember you. I still remember a student of mine who ended up coming. I remembered him at the age of 11. I met him at a friend's party, and I was so impressed by the way how a young boy like him could speak. And 9 years later, he came a student in college with me.
Mhm.
And I still remembered him, and he of course couldn't remember who I was, so it was fine. But I remembered him.
Mhm.
And imagine at the age of 11, how much he impressed me that I could remember him 9 years later. So guys, don't lose an opportunity even now, yeah?
Mhm. Yes, and I think that's a very important message that has resonated between all three speakers, is about the opportunities that are available to us. So sometimes it's not about whether someone is preparing it for you or they give you that opportunity, but you have to be able to learn to identify those opportunities for yourself. So thank you for all the sharing this from the speakers. I think I've learned a lot as well, but let's hear from our audience. So what questions you have for your speakers, and are there any advices you'd like to ask or get more insights? So I can see there's a few questions here, but if you're not if you're interested, but if you're comfortable with it as well, feel free to unmute yourself and ask, okay? So you can first raise your hand so that we don't interrupt the flow, but I'll begin with some of the questions that we have on the screen right now. Okay, so one of our audience members have asked, currently I'm searching for an internship. However, due to the current situation, it's hard to find one. I'm giving up. Specifically to Mr. Brian, do you have any advice?
You can forward your contact to me. We can have a chat. I'm looking for interns. I'm also on three different coalitions of NGOs on mental health, on children, on rare diseases, and also on disability. And all the NGOs, actually, one of the most interesting places to work is for nonprofit, because you meet all kinds of characters in nonprofits. And if you're willing to go that way, yeah, I'm more than happy to. I'm not sure who Anonymous is, but I'm more than happy to link you up with them. So let me know if you're interested.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Brian. So to the person who sent that in and anyone in the audience right now, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. And I think this event clearly shows the opportunities that you have yet to explore. So thank you so much, Mr. Brian. We'll go to the next question. So to Dr. Michael, having skillful teachers are important, but it might be costly. So how should we help the teachers?
As students helping the teachers, or as society?
Well, if you're the one who asked the question, feel free to elaborate. But yeah, if no one is going to expand on that, I think we could interpret just the general community itself. Both,
Yeah.
I think, more academic community, since that's where teachers are being employed. So how can we support teachers to keep them? I would say, yeah.
To keep teachers, well, that's a $60 million question, really, about how do we keep teachers and stop the fallout of good teachers and moving away from the teaching profession. We are never, as teachers, we are never going to be millionaires, and we accept that. But what we get back is we can't measure that. It's incredible. What we can do as a society is, one, just recognize the role teachers have at all levels, and how we impact on communities as well. Needs to be recognized as well in some ways, but it's not going to happen overnight. What we need to do really is then to recognize the value of teaching and what schools do in terms of community bases. They're not just about teaching the children, they provide other services for parents and communities, and for coming together, for the dissemination of information and new ideas as well. And it has to work two ways. I'm not going to say pay teachers fantastic salaries and give them, company profile, company cars and that thing, because that doesn't work. What does work is then the respect for education and the understanding that education has an impact to change people's lives that doing your degree or doing your A-levels or O-level, whatever you're doing, will change your life. I promise you. I don't think Fatima would be sitting here now had she not gone through the university. It was that having that ticket almost to be able to get into and then learn it. And Brian will appreciate some of the skills we students attain whilst in school, college and university. But again, we need to think about other things as well. So with teachers, they are agents of change. And we are agents of change, which in a way we can influence society, or we can provide society with a reasonable workforce, with a fit for purpose workforce in the later years as well. I think teachers also have a responsibility for their own professional development. And for that continuous professional development, something I think I've said to most of you who have taught, that it doesn't end at the end of your degree. We continue to learn, and we update in the pedagogic approaches and content knowledge as well. What I'd really like to do is to see the level of skill and education of teachers go up another notch as well. In order for the country, for Malaysia to become much more competitive, to stop the early exit from the teaching profession. We lose a lot of good teachers, particularly in the United Kingdom and in the Indian Ocean, Mauritius and particularly Mauritius and Seychelles. So I think that type of thing, and more community involvement, and for teachers and parents to formulate a partnership. The schools do have this homeschool agreement of where they signed in like an official contract and things like that. I've seen that, but parents need to take some responsibility as well in order and working together and moving those. But Brian and I need to work much more closely together, and we also need to bring in people like Fatima to give us the insight, which I've learned such a great deal this afternoon, and some of it has been reinforced. So I'm really grateful for this event.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. And yes, definitely, we all have our roles to play, regardless of what our title or position in society may be. So it's really up to us whether or not we take the opportunity to initiate that. So I think the next question would be directed towards Fatima. So what's your advice for students who will be joining the workplace? I'm quite scared to work. So I would say this is probably for someone who's about to graduate this year or potentially seeking for internships. So maybe you could share a few advice to them.
Yeah, sure. So if you're scared of, for example, that you won't have the necessary skills when you're on the job, that's a normal thing. I face that as well. Like even sometimes at work, I feel like, imposter syndrome is a thing. You're like, oh my God, I think they did a mistake by hiring me. I don't know what I'm doing. It's very normal. It happens throughout your career journey. So the way to tackle that is to, just keep learning, gain more knowledge. Some people have this impression that after you graduate, after you're done with the university, the learning stops there. That's not true. Learning is a lifelong process. You need to keep upskilling yourself, especially like, for example, I feel like tech. If you stop learning, that's when you stagnate, and then people wouldn't want to work with you or hire you. So keep learning, and you will gain more confidence in yourself. If you're scared of making mistakes and costing a company a lot of money, like Dr. Michael and Mr. Brian mentioned, is that make those mistakes right now. There's less at stake when you do it right now. So learn how to fail and fail fast and learn from it. And also, one advice I would give for students is to know your worth and don't get exploited. So a lot of the times, because you're a fresh grad, sometimes you would just want to get the first offer that comes to you. You're like, oh my God, someone wants to hire me. You just accept it. So don't rush into that. Know your worth and talk to other graduates in the in the field, knowing like, for example, what opportunities lies elsewhere, and know your rights. And also don't be afraid of quitting a job if you feel like it doesn't fill your purpose or doesn't meet your needs, like or if you're being treated horribly, it's better to do that change earlier on than later in life. So especially those first few years after university, it's a good time to explore like different options and change job until you find the one that like suits you. So yeah, just keep learning to get more confidence and know your worth. And, you'll be great. Don't worry. It's normal to feel scared, but you'll be fine.
Thank you so much, Fatima. Even myself, although I'm not graduating yet, but hearing that, I feel very reassured. And definitely, learning is lifelong, and I think that's a very important mindset to uphold, regardless. So it really shouldn't stop with university. Yeah. So we actually have our first participant who has raised their hand. So Nafisa, would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question?
Hello. Okay, so first of all, I just want to say thank you, Fatima, for sharing. That was like really inspiring. I learned a lot, and also for Dr. Michael and Mr. Brian. And thanks, Sabrina, for organizing this, and also the team behind this. So good to see you guys. I have a question for Mr. Brian. So I really like your point about, like asking questions just now. It actually, braved me up to ask a question for you here. So considering your extensive experience in the nonprofit sector, my question is, how is the working environment different in a nonprofit sector compared to corporate, and also or like working culture? So yeah, I wish to know more about that.
Okay, you will find when you study organizational behavior, when you do your master's, for example, you will find there are many kind of leaders that you will find, right? 10, 12 different types of leaders. But basically, in the nonprofit sector, you have a lot of personality-based leadership. That means it's about the personality, not so much. It's either about the personality or about the cause. So it's not uncommon because I started this. It was my wife who died of cancer. So therefore, I started this cancer organization. It's personal. So if you're asking me that would be, in some ways, it could be very beneficial. In some ways, it could be very draining because I didn't share that loss that you shared. You know what I mean? So yeah, the nonprofit sector for me is something I hold very dear. I sit on 13 boards, both locally and internationally. And if you ask me what was my employability, I got hired by the UN when the minimum standard that they had to hire was that you must have a master's degree, and I had no master's degree. And they hired me, and within a year and a half, I became the technical advisor for 3 countries. Again, based on output. Again, the reason why I did it was why I was so good at my work was because of my network. They were stuck. They couldn't finish many of the projects, and it took me 3 months to unfurl all of that because of my contacts. So coming back to what Dr. Michael was saying, what Fatima is saying, it's very important to marry all these skills together, and networking is one of them. So your question, back again, sorry, it can be very personality based. It can be very extremely draining sometimes emotionally, but most of the time it's pretty rewarding because you're meeting people who are inspired, people who want to bring change to the world, and people who put their money where their mouth is. And I think that's one of the most inspiring things that you can get to have in a boss, I think.
Thank you so much for the insight,
Thank you.
Mr. Brian. And thank you, Nafisa, for taking this opportunity to ask Mr. Brian as well, because it's not every day we have someone who both has industry, corporate experience, as well as the nonprofit organization experience. All right. So I think based on the questions on the screen right now, we do have some interesting questions. If I'm not mistaken, Mashita, if you could scroll down, there was a question regarding the responsibility of university. Yes. Okay. So I think this one is a bit more controversial. Education is about preparing students for learning, questioning knowledge, and developing thinking skills. So is student employability now a responsibility of universities? So I think for this question, we could first start with Dr. Michael. What do you think about this question?
Yeah, it's a very, very, very good question. Yes, our primary function is about learning and developing those thinking skills and with the knowledge. But to answer the final part of that question, I think it is some of the responsibility of universities to prepare students for the workplace. And we've heard Brian and Fatima and are very brave participant to come forward with a question talking about the challenges and the differences between corporate and not-for-profit and charitable organizations. I used to teach organizational behavior, and part of that program, we would identify the different types of leader and the different leadership styles they can adopt, and management styles as well. And there is no real difference in between any of those organizations. It is about personality as well. But going back to this question of whether universities have to be responsible, it goes back really to the philosophy of education. Why do we have an education system and an education programs, and why do universities exist? Is it for the pursuit of knowledge, to write lots of nice books and put them in a library and understand our world around us? But yeah, okay, there is the element of that, but then essentially we have an education system to, one, improve the life chances of its people, or two, to provide tomorrow's workforce, people who are fit for work for tomorrow. So employability has to come in there. We did try, and I'll share this with you, and it was a bit of a disaster, of having taught sessions on employability, and this was back in the UK. And when we were doing that, we'd get everybody in a classroom and say, this is how you're going to be a good worker. This is how you're going to be a productive member of staff. Well, you can imagine then what the situation would be like in that classroom. It was on a Friday evening between 7 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. on that. The students weren't particularly interested, okay, I understand that, but the assignments were actually things like writing a CV or writing a fictitious letter for an offer of an employment as well. And those were seen as such of the skills relating to employability. What we've missed and what we need to do is then to develop those, again, those softer skills, those personality traits, the things employers are looking for. Personality, the ability to work, to deal with conflicts. And it's okay, we can disagree on something, but it means we shouldn't be holding resentment or anything. And this is what happens as well within workplaces. People do have disagreements, and I'm sure Brian will back me up on this. People do, there are sort of little groups which develop, friendship groups, or informal groups who develop in larger organizations of people as well. And it's understanding how they work. And I've always said to you that it's the level of emotional intelligence and to be able to be the resilience of being able to deal with difficult times, leaving our problems outside of the classroom and dealing with work and meeting the needs of the organization, whichever organization it is, if it's public, private, or charitable. And NGOs, though, it really doesn't matter as well. So I do think we do have a responsibility for developing employability for our students, but the students also have to accept some of that responsibility as well as they're doing the learning. And we need the help of employers to reinforce this, that this is an important feature. And how do you tell somebody to be nice? How do you learn to be nice? It's a difficult concept, but again, through modeling and good practice and exposure through internships and work experience, I think that will help as well. Because like Brian said, they would much prefer to have somebody with lower grades who's a great person than somebody who's an absolute genius, but terrible to work with, or got a horrible personality, doesn't work as a team, isn't particularly motivated, and doesn't care about anybody else. Then, you know, it's meaningless. So those skills have become more important. I think we can develop this. And what we do in some of our classes, then we replicate what it's really like to be in a school, for example, in the School of Education. My students know this. They've done lesson plans. They have done micro-teaching sessions. They've written instructor manuals on how to do this thing. And then they've gone out and done it as well as part of their assignments. And it works particularly well. And I'll ask you in 2 years' time about how well it's gone. But I think that type of thing, and particularly that can be replicated in other curriculum areas. I think we're going to do okay about that. It is a massive task.
Yeah.
And it's not one of those things which is going to happen overnight and people's attitudes will change towards this. It's ongoing. We need to network. We need to share good practice. And I think we've made a start on that as well.
Definitely.
Through a network of independent schools here in Malaysia and our contacts within the UK and China as well.
Yeah. Yes. And I definitely agree that employability may be one of the responsibilities of universities, but they are not alone in doing that, because you have to consider the different factors. For example, employers, what are they looking for? Students, what are the characteristics and skills you possess, and whether or not you want to take that step. Because if you don't overcome that first barrier, because you are always your biggest block, but also biggest motivator. So if you don't overcome that, then you will have put yourself in a position where you don't move anywhere. You don't move forward, you don't move backward.
Yeah, I was interested to hear what Fatima said about the imposter syndrome of feeling, oh, I shouldn't be here. I'm not worthy to be here. And that is a natural form of getting used to that. But what we can do, we could, through internships and work experience and maybe bring an employer. Do we bring employers into universities enough to listen to them? We did in England. We had course committees, and there's a group of employers there. But they, at the end of the day, they felt that they were being ignored because of the constraints of the curriculum of what had to be taught in those times. So again, it's changing the philosophy, it's changing the culture. And again, with this, just that on a final one, sorry.
No worries.
Is student employability a responsibility of the unit? We can't be held responsible if somebody doesn't get a job, because that wouldn't really be fair. What we would say is really we will make every effort to help you improve your life chances.
Yes.
And I think that is where we can do, and have some form of strategic plan to develop the employability skills as well.
Yeah.
Because then they're going back to the philosophy of education and why is it here? And we have to think about tomorrow's workforce and tomorrow's skill sets, not today's. That will be history tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. You phrased it very well, Dr. Michael.
Thank you ever so much. I'll be quiet. I'm sorry.
So I think, like I mentioned, I still encourage anyone who's interested to voice out their questions to click on the raise hand function and unmute themselves. But in the meantime, I'll cover one question that I think our speakers brought up a lot. Mashita, if you could scroll down to the, okay, yeah, right here. So I think a lot of us have mentioned using networking or being able to network. So which platforms did you use to network with peers or other professionals, and what questions do you ask them to stay in contact? I think we could go with Fatima first.
Yeah, networking is definitely an important thing. So your first goal would be LinkedIn, definitely. Like if you're a student and you don't have a LinkedIn account yet, you're missing out. So start creating a LinkedIn account. Start by following your lecturers, your work peers, and then go on into following people that in the field that you're interested in. Reach out to them by talking about their work. So first of all, do a bit of research on what is the work that they're doing, and then ask them more about their work, and maybe talk about how what you have might help with the work that they're doing, and also be active on LinkedIn, post stuff that may be beneficial to the people that you're following. This way you get engagement and you're more present. You have this digital presence. So if someone has an opportunity comes up, someone might keep you in mind, and you will probably get it. So and also with your peers, I guess one way to stay in touch is if you're close to them, Facebook or Instagram, if that's something that you would want to do, or you could just keep it professional with LinkedIn. And you can ask questions like asking for advice. So let's say if you're facing a tough decision, you can ask them for advice. This way you can keep in touch. Congratulate them on their achievements. If they get a new job, congratulate them and give them a meaningful message. This way you maintain these good ties with your network, and later on, if a problem, just like Mr. Brian mentioned, is a lot of the ways he was able to succeed at his job at UN was the contacts that he had. So make sure that you keep in touch with those people, and you make the full use of networking.
All right. To Mr. Brian, do you actually have anything to add to that, especially with your extensive experience with networking?
Yeah, I think it's a very structured process. What correctly said by Fatima, start with LinkedIn. At least have one or two clubs in school. There's the whole purpose of why universities have clubs in the first place, because you meet someone outside your realm of study. You never know, because we don't live in silos, we don't work in silos. We will meet people from other different areas of work. There are Rotaract clubs, there are other social clubs, Toastmasters. These are all things you can join once a month, once a quarter. That don't take up too much of your time. And working with a non-profit is not a bad idea at all. Don't forget, non-profits have many patrons, and many of those patrons come from wealthy backgrounds and may have jobs. May be impressed by you and offer you a job. That's how I got offered the job in the UN. I never applied for the job in the UN. It was given to me on a silver platter, which never happens. It was because they were impressed with my work and they asked me, could you come and join us and work on this program with us for 3 months? 3 months turned out to be 5 years. So yeah, it's a matter of that. And just to answer one more very quick question that I read about, in the beginning, it's about efficiency. I agree, but if your quality of work, if you are not a pleasant person to work with, I would also drop you like a hot potato. No cheaters, no perpetrators. There is a certain standard that we live by, and if you cannot have that standard, then my employees have to follow that standard too. So yeah, sorry if you are not a good person. I think Dr. Michael pointed it out too. At the end of the day, we will drop you. There's no point having a non-team player that destroys 60 other people just because of your joyous self-indulgence. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brian. So I think we have around 9 minutes left. I think we can take around 2 more questions. So let's take a look at what questions there are. Mashita, possibly you could scroll down or scroll up. Okay. Yeah, I think one interesting one would be many of the 21st century skills highlighted, I think not just by myself, but also by all the speakers today. Relying on universities to teach them would be tough and unfair, but who else? So maybe Mr. Brian, how do you think students should be gaining these soft skills? Is it something taught, or where would they be able to develop these as they go along their journey?
I mean, again, expecting university to suddenly top you up, with 90% of the soft skills needed when it should have been developed while you were in primary school and secondary school. Compassion starts from a young age. It's not a matter. It's unfortunate that many of you, I think, who go to Nottingham would have come from private schools, I believe. Many of you that come to BAC come from private schools. So it's unfortunate here in Malaysia now that the government school system, which is not a bad system at all, unfortunately, it's just we hear bad stories, anecdotal stories. As a whole, the government system is fine. But unfortunately it's being infiltrated by radical thinking, by what do you call it, religious leanings, which is not right, regardless of the religion. So I think this is where the parents have some degree of culpability of making sure, from a young age I was given responsibility by my mom. So from a young age I learned to be responsible. So it all depends on our background. School is supposed to supplement that. Our parents are the first line of education for us. Then comes the school, and then comes university after that. And if you don't have that cup to be filled in all those 3 stages, then you as a young person hopefully is aware enough and go look for it. Go look for it by being involved in experiential, experiences like internships, volunteer programs, teaching at a school, at a refugee school. I can't even begin to start. There's so many opportunities here in Malaysia for you to do. During the flood, you can go out and join a team and distribute the food on their behalf. See how the other half of the world lives, and only then you can appreciate who you are. Because if you don't appreciate who you are, then I think life will always be a little bit sorry, because you're always looking for the Tesla and not for the Perodua, you know what I mean? And not appreciating what you have and always, looking for something you can never achieve, or it's just too difficult to achieve. So I think that's very important. Understanding who you are and where you come from, a sense of self. If you're asking me what I would look for when that hidden, it's all very hidden. You only get a sense of it when you interview a person. I want someone who has a sense of herself or himself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important for me. If they have a sense of self, a sense of morality, a sense of dignity about who they are, and self-worth, or you believe they are worth, but maybe they're not really there, then you can help them want to fill that cup up. Then those are the kind of people that I would like to employ, not the ones that are overflowing with overabundance of self-confidence to the point that there's no place for you in that whole scheme of things.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think, yeah, definitely I agree with that. So one last question. I think we'll go to the internship one. So to Fatima, especially, with your suggestions to go for internships, but also knowing your self-worth, maybe not particularly how education institutions attended to this issue, but in general, how should students attend to this issue if they encounter this situation?
So I would say of course, like knowing your worth is very important. So if you find yourself exploited in a sense that maybe you're being asked to do more than what you signed up for, or you're being treated very not in a good manner, first thing you would do is to communicate with the person that's causing the trouble. So let's say your boss, make them understand that you don't want to be treated this way, because you dictate how other people treat you. So you allow that. If you allow for that, then they'll treat you that way. So you need to communicate, take a stance, make them understand that this is not how you want to be treated. And if that doesn't work, then just leave. It's not worth it. You're just an intern. It's not like a big thing to stay in that company. Leave. There's a lot of other companies with great teams and mentorships and opportunities to grow. So and if that it will demotivate you, but just you need to learn to understand that the real world, not everyone is good. You will face problems. Just move on to the next opportunity, and try to, before joining a company, I think this is one step to avoid the exploitation, is before you sign that contract, before joining the company, do your research. Know when you go on LinkedIn, for example, and you go onto click on people who work there, you can see like the type of people that work in the company. You can look up their profiles, see what things are involved in, and it gives you a sense of the people that you'll be working with. So that's one advice I would give to students before applying for an internship in a company. Know that who are the people that are working there and what are their values. So this way you would know like how you would be treated when you're there. And yeah, that would be like my advice.
All right, thank you so much, Fatima. And that would bring us to the end of the forum today. So I'll just, sum up the main ideas. And yes, you can see the appreciation from the floor on the screen as well. So based on this whole forum today, I think a few key messages we can take note of is, of course, firstly is understanding the role university plays in your career readiness, whether you are an employee of the university, an employer who works with the university, or a student of the university. What you have to know where you stand and where the university stands throughout this journey of your career path. Then next would be really to understand yourselves and know yourself, because as much as it's important for everyone else to be a part of bringing you forward to where you want to reach, you are just as important, because you are that main character of that story. And last but not least, it would be, I think, something that we should all remember is learning is a lifelong journey. And all of this that we've discussed today is part of a learning that you will always have to keep an eye out for, regardless of the experiences, opportunities you're exposed to. So if you think you've missed out on opportunities, take this chance now to start reaching out for more, or opening your eyes and seeing from a different perspective what is out there for you. So with that, thank you to our speakers for humbly accepting our invitation and for spending your whole afternoon with us. It was very insightful and we really appreciate it. So thank you, Dr. Michael, Fatima, and Mr. Brian. To our audience, thank you for joining us, and we hope that you have benefited from this session. And now I would like to pass the session back to Mishita.
All right. Thank you so much, Sabrina, for being a great moderator. And thank you so much for all the speakers, from Dr. Michael to Fatima and also Mr. Brian. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Um, in addition, I would like to add a few from our late Professor Ghana. Based on our first online forum, he did say that take this opportunity in your university to recreate yourself into becoming a better person. So before we end the session, uh, the link will be given, a feedback form link will be given by Hassan, and you can suggest what type of forum would you like us to organize in the near future. Um, on a side note, the session has been recorded and it will be posted on UNM FB page. So before that, let's take a photo. Can everyone on your camera? Wait, we will take a picture. Right, while waiting, you can also send your feedback, share us your feedback on what do you think on this event. So, all right, I think everyone is here. All right, I'll take the screenshot. All right, everybody ready? 1, 2, 3. One more. Okay, 1, 2, 3. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for spending your evening with us. Have a great rest. Have a great weekend ahead, and to my Muslim friends, have a great Ramadan. So yeah, thank you so much for attending. I'll see you guys whenever I can see.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye bye. Thank you so much for organizing this event, and thank you to speakers as well.
You're more than welcome. Nice to meet you, Fatima and Brian, as co-speakers as well. I will be in
Yeah.
touch.
Sure.
Yeah, let's all connect on LinkedIn, like we mentioned.
Definitely, definitely. Well done, everybody. Brilliant afternoon.